Hi, this is Adam Fisher, and throughout this video series, we're going to learn 3ds Max, which is a 3D modeling and animation software for 3D graphic needs. First thing first, let's get started. Let's learn about the interface. Just looking at 3ds Max, up top we have your basic menus. A lot of these menus here we're going to be able to kind of go through as I go through this video series, and we'll be able to explore these in reference to creating shapes and three-dimensional objects, and eventually we'll get into bone tools for animation. But just look at the create menu. If I click this, you'll see we have standard primitives. We have some basic shapes we can create from here. Extended primitives, these are other shapes that give you different options to work with. AC objects, this is like for just basic creating shapes that actually reaches final results, but you're basically 3D modeling a structure. So you also have foliage options and other assets to work with. I'm going to go down. You basically have two-dimensional shapes. These actually will create from a two-dimensional perspective that can be converted to 3D. We have lights, we have cameras, and we have other helper objects, which are dummy objects. There's space warps, which are basically like fundamentals for like forces, wind elements, and such. And the list goes on in all of these properties in these menus here. First things first, let's take a look at creating what we want to set up is a 3D modeling atmosphere for creating a 3D character. Because what I want to do is actually explore through these series. I want to create a 3D character, or using basic shapes to create 3D characters and child-parent system hierarchies for three-dimensional needs and definitely for animation needs as it applies to work in the industry. So let's go start by actually setting up our interface with the plane, which we can use as images to model around. So I'm going to go ahead and go to standard primitives and go to plane. I'm going to select plane. What I want to do is you want to create a plane in your front and left view. So I'm going to actually, on the mouse, I can hold down and push down on the middle mouse wheel, and it allows me to pan down. That's exactly what I do. Because if I look at the front view here, notice that this is the z-axis. If I'm looking, and this is my ground plane, it's if I'm standing on this plane looking at the z-axis. So when I create this plane, I'm going to left click and drag across my frontal view. As you can see, it's already been built in the perspective view. I create this plane here, and it's in wireframes, so we can kind of get a good sense of what's going on. If we look at the top view, this is actually if we're looking like bird's eye view. We're looking straight down on the plane. And then in my left view, if I, again, push down on the middle mouse wheel, I can pan down. I can see that we're looking as if we're looking at profile view. Now, the perspective view, I'm just going to hold down again on the middle mouse wheel, allow me to pan. I can use the middle mouse wheel to, and basically just roll the mouse wheel back, and I can zoom out or roll it forward, moving in. Okay? Now, if I hold down on the Alt key on my PC and then I push down on the middle mouse wheel on my mouse, this allows me to actually pan around my 3D perspective view here, and I can get a better glance of what's going on. Now, once an object's created in 3ds Max, I'm just going to left click and deselect, and I can left click again, and I'm going to select again, and you're going to see that when an object's created, you have what's called segments, okay? And I have segments floating throughout this plane object here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on what's called the Modify menu, and I'm going to click on this Modify menu right here in the interface. It's going to roll down and show you that we have different modifications we can make to the parameters. So length segments, I'm going to take these down to 1 because this is a plane that we want to use for 3D modeling. And just by modifying these properties inside these parameters, you can see that those segments disappear. I'm going to take this down now to 1 because I got vertical and I got width segments. And then just having no segments is going to be an easier plane to actually work with to place what we want to place on here is our turnaround, which we're going to actually discuss here in a little bit. So I'm going to take this plane. Now let's learn about the move tools. Up top, you're going to notice I got select and move, rotate, and scale. These keys are also found on your keyboard. Move and select is actually W. And you're going to see when I select W, I have what's called a gizmo, and it's a controller. It has your X, Y, and Z axis. Now, depending on the view that you're looking at, if we look at perspective, this is going to be moving. This control handle being the green one, if you notice it's Y, it's going to be moving along the Y axis. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to move this plane so I can move it across my grid, and it will allow us to actually model a character in the middle, which is going to be the origin. And then right here, this is the X axis, and I can move it left to right horizontally. And then we have the Z axis, and that's technically our vertical axis. If I click and move that, that's up and down based on the grid. Now I'm going to go Control Z because I don't want to do that. you want to be sure your plane that we're going to be creating here, system of planes, you want to be sure that your planes are actually resting on the grid because we want to model our character based off the origin. So I'm going to take this plane that's been developed now, and we're going to use the rotate tool. And I can use the rotate, and I can actually use its axis. Notice it has like more of an orbital controller. And I could go along the horizontal axis and allows us to rotate the plane, which if we were to create another plane, I could flip it this way, and then we could actually have it facing the left view. If you can see, it's in the left view. Let me go Control Z real quick and back that out. I want to do that. Notice this control allows us to flip the plane forwards and back. Now I'm going to hit Control Z because I don't really want to do that. Now what I can do is I can also even take the Scale and Uniform tool, and if you notice now, I want to left click and drag on the Scale tool from the middle, not the outside. Notice that this actually will create non-uniform scale. This is actually creating a warp effect, and that's going to really lead to a lot of terrible results in the end. It's called deformation. We don't want to do that because if you actually create a shape with not in uniform scale using these other type of scale tools, and this was a object or character object that would become later, and we use like the animation rigging of bone tools, it's going to create a lot of warping and distortion. So you want to make sure that you're always at times scaling your objects from the center of the scale tool. So if I left click and drag, notice from the center, it's allowing me to maintain uniform scale. I can do that in any views. I can use any of these tools. If I want to activate the front view, just press down the middle mouse wheel. That's the easiest method. And then notice that it looks like you want the symbol to look like that in the scale tool. You want it to look like this. So on a left click and drag, it's maintaining uniform scale. I'm going to go Control Z. All right, and then in the top view, I can do the same, see? All right, and then even in the left view. All right, I can use the rotate tool in any of the other views. Let's take a look. I'm going to activate the top as if it's bird's eye view looking down. If I use the outside ring, left click and drag, voila, it's rotating perfectly. I want to go Control Z and back out again. Okay, and then the move tool, I can just simply move it around based off just X and Y in the top view, and that's my bird's eye view. So I'm going to build this first plane so it matches up on the grid. That's basically the system of tools to work with to start. I'm going to take this, I can right click on it. I can go what's called clone. I'm going to say I want to do a copy and click OK. I have two planes, so as soon as I hit the rotate tool and then I use the top view, if I activate it here and left click and drag the outside ring, it's going to rotate this plane, and now I got two of them. And now what I'm going to do is actually equal this thing up so it's perfectly aligned like so, okay, with the x-axis, and that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to go to the Move tool, and now I can use its Control Gizmo to move it perfectly. And I'm going to move this thing back. So I'm going to use, moving forward, I'm going to use my top, front, and left views as the Move tools, and everything I see here in the perspective view when I'm 3D modeling, I'm going to basically use this only for viewing. You're best off using your front, top, and left views for actual modeling when you're doing character modeling and so forth, other modeling. So I'm going to actually select that, move it over. I'm going to select the next plane, use the Move tool. I'm going to move it on up. And you're noticing by doing so, it allows us to move this plane back here. If I move it forward, lines up the grid. So I know I got to select this one, and I'm going to move it this way. And voila, now you notice that I got my two planes, okay, perfectly matched up on the grid. That's exactly what we want. So go ahead and take some time, if you have to pause the video, and just get familiar with all the tools that we discussed thus far. Okay, so now let's go ahead and bring in our turnaround drawing, which is our concept drawing of our character that we're going to use for 3D modeling purposes. What I have open here is Photoshop. And Photoshop is one of those softwares that's very crucial. It's actually what I like to call, and I teach all my students that it's the driving backbone force for pretty much anything you do in the digital arts. So I want to go to File, Open in Photoshop. And I'm going to open up this image that I found, which is this male turnaround image. And I'm going to click Open. This is what we call a turnaround drawing. Now looking at this turnaround drawing for 3D modeling needs, notice where the arms are, okay? So if I go and create just a new layer here, just to kind of help properly explain this. We want the arms to be at a nice diagonal, okay? About 25, 30 degrees out, just like this. We want them to flow that direction, okay? We do not want to have our arms basically out like this in our turnaround drawing. The reason being, okay, is if we have our arms created where they're stretched out like this, when we go to the character rigging part, okay, and we have our bone chains all made and we're doing a system of child-parent hierarchy, when this arm comes down, these polygons, which are located right here underneath the arms, are going to move up. And it's going to distort pretty much all the top part of this character, okay? So when you look at this turnaround drawing, I'm going to undo. Notice that where the arms are, and this is going to allow us, when we 3D model this, correctly, so when we actually rig the arms accordingly, all of these polys are going to be able to move, and they're going to crunch slightly here, but they're not going to be so extreme to basically throw all this top part up here out of distortion, okay? Now, there's really only two views that we technically need, and that is the frontal view, okay, and the profile view. Now, when we look at a lot of turnaround drawings, a lot of times artists will even do the back view like this, okay? And sometimes they might even do a 3/4 foreshortened view, okay? And they sometimes do 5 views, just so the art director can get a nice, good sense of what the whole body style looks like. But just for 3D modeling needs, the only 2 views we technically need is the frontal and the profile. Now I'm going to bring this whole image into 3ds Max regardless. I don't need to, and if I don't want to bring the whole image in, I can hit the crop tool here in Photoshop and easily use its control parameters, control handle, bring to what I really need, and hit enter, and I can literally save this image as a JPEG just like this. So if I only wanted to use these 2 views, I could do that. So I could go to File, Save As, and I could change this format from Photoshop to JPEG. That's exactly what I want to use. And I could save it as, let's say, male turnaround. This is front and side, okay? But I'm going to bring in the whole turnaround just for this lesson. And basically, I could take this whole turnaround and go File, again, Save As, change its format from Photoshop to JPEG, and I'm going to save it as the male turnaround image. We want to use JPEGs for 3D modeling needs, okay? Okay. JPEGs read best in 3ds Max and other software like Maya and so forth. Now back in 3ds Max. Looking at this, how do we get this image onto these planes and we are able to use the image on both planes to model at the origin? Well, it's very easy. If I actually hit M on my keyboard, or I can click the little icon up top, it's called Material Editor. Notice that this window appears and it looks just like this. Now there's 2 modes that might open one mode or the other. If you go to modes, I'm going to actually work from what's called the Compact Material Editor mode. So with that mode activated, this is exactly what I see within the menu. This is the easiest mode to actually work with in 3ds Max. As you get more advanced with 3D software, it actually has more of like a child-parent system linking of hierarchy that opens up in the Material Editor. And in Maya, they call it the Hypershade Editor, okay? 3ds Max is going to be the easiest editor to work with for basic understanding of textures, which is what I'm going to be presenting to you throughout the series. Let's select my first swatch right here. Now, if you only have a certain range, you can right-click on it and say go 6x4 to get more swatches available for your needs. I'm going to select the first one. Notice it has its own parameters that come down. And I'm going to click on the diffuse box, which is called the none box next to diffuse. This is the color option. I'm going to actually select what's called bitmap. Double click it. And that's going to allow me to actually open up one of my turnaround drawings. I said I would select the male turnaround with the back, okay? I'm going to select it. And when you're bringing an image in, make sure it has either a good rectangle or square, okay, for your plane. I'm going to show you why. I'm going to actually select it. Let's click Open. And notice now we have this image, and it has this little texture icon, which is representing the texture, which is that turnaround wrapped around a sphere. That can be beneficial, or it can actually not help at all. In this case, it's not. I can use the middle mouse wheel, any texture I load here, and actually kind of move it around and get a good idea of what it's going to look like if it's applied to an object such as a sphere. Well, we don't want to add this. This is basically acting as a texture, and we're not applying it to a sphere object. We're applying it to more of a rectangle or plane object. So I can actually left-click and hold down on what's called the sample type, and I can come on over and select what's called a rectangle object. Now we can get more of a sense of what it's going to look like when it's added to the plane. And just by holding down the middle mouse wheel, I can actually move this text around and get a better glance at it. When I get something I like, okay, you want to first make sure that Show Shaded Material in Viewport is active. So I want to turn on this function. And then I want to left click and drag. I want to drop it onto my object that's coming up. Notice this says plane 1 and plane 2. Drop on plane 2 and voila, there it is. I'm going to take this one on down as well. And voila. When you're done with the material editor, you can just basically minimize or close it out. And remember, you can get in there anytime by clicking this icon or hitting M on your keyboard. All right, so this is our planes. I'm going to actually pan around here. Hold down the middle mouse wheel. It's kind of pan around. Hold the Alt key and then the middle mouse. Move around here and rotate around. Take a look at it. It looks like my drawings are a little crunched. And that's normal. Don't worry about it. So how do we fix this? Well, let's do this. We're going to select this plane here. Notice that this is plane 2. So if I hover over it inside the perspective view, and notice I have it selected here, its name is going to come up under the modify panel. So here's the modify panel. It looks like this light blue rainbow. It's called modify. I can rename it. It doesn't have to be called plane 2. I can actually make it simple. Use the keyboard. I'm just going to say, let's name this plane 2. I'm going to select this one, say, not 001. Let's just call it plane 1. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to take plane 2 and select it. And then what I'm going to do is right click on plane 2. And we're going to convert it to, you can actually select from either one. Both of these give you different parameters to explore. In this lesson, we're going to be doing editable poly. Once it's converted to editable poly, now notice that all the segment modification parameters go away. If I click this little function, this little plus key, all these different properties come out. Now, what this means is I can modify the shape based on vertex, edge, border, and polygon. Let's take a look. I'm going to go to vertex. I want to select vertex. I can actually left click and drag if I have that selection tool activated. And my selection tool is right here. Select object. Its hotkey is actually Q as well. Okay? So you might at times find yourself where you actually have to click Q to lock, get yourself out of one area in the 3D software, but it allows you to select other things like this. So I can left click and drag and do like a marquee rectangle selection and say I only want these two vertices selected. These are called vertex individually and vertices when you're saying plural. And then I can use these controllers that we learned. So I can use the move tool. And I can go based off the y-axis. Use the top view, left click and drag, and I can stretch this plane out. It's going to give me the proper proportions to build from. I'm going to go back to editable poly to get myself out of there. So make sure you always go back to its name, editable poly, and notice it comes back and allows me to actually move it in union as one object again. I can go Control Z. So let's take this first plane, being plane 1, and let's delete it. So I'm going to select it and hit delete because we want to actually create two planes that look the same. So I'll take this one. Instead of right-clicking and going to clone again, let's do the hotkey process. I'm going to select it, hit rotate. I'm going to hold shift down on my keyboard and rotate it. And voila, there's its copy. I'm going to rotate it perfectly. Before I take my finger off shift, I'm going to remove my click. I'm going to release my click. That's going to say, do you want the clone options? Okay, and then I'll take my finger off shift, and voila, I got that new clone plane. It's the exact same width and height as the one I just modified, and I'll use the control, the move tool, and I'll just go ahead and move this plane back to where it needs to be. So again, I'm using the middle mouse wheel to pan, push it down, pan, hold Alt to rotate, and also to move it in and out and zoom. So before I actually start character modeling, what I would like to do is I'm going to go up to the symbol max. I'm going to come on down. I'm going to say save as. After I've tracked down my folder, I'm just going to save this as my file name. I'm going to say this lecture 3ds max for right now. So that's what I'm doing for you. I hit save. And then I'm going to go back up to the max symbol. I'm just going to go to reset because I can hit reset at this point in time now that I've saved all this. So I'm going to hit reset. You really want to reset? Yes. New fresh scene to work with here. Let's go ahead and just kind of analyze and look at what all the different primitives we can create. So here's a box. I'm going to start the box. And the way you do a box is, and when you create any primitive or shape 3D object in 3ds Max, always create in the top view. That way you're building that object on the plane and at the origin. So I'm going to left click and drag, and it creates the base of this box. When I release my click on my mouse, I just move my hand up, and then it allows me to actually create the vertical part of this box. When I left click, it's complete, and I can just pan around again and just look at my box I've created. And when you create any three-dimensional object, remember how we created that plane? Its parameters are going to be set by default. You got length, width, and height segments. Keep your box at 1, just for now, but you can always add more segments as you want to modify it further before I convert it. So I would basically add the number of segments I want, and then when I right-click on it to convert to polygon, well, then this allows me to actually modify it based on vertex using those move, rotate, and scale tools. Okay. Edge allows me to actually select the edges based off the segments. Polygon, that's going to be the one that you use the most. So if I select this, I can actually move the polygon. If I hold Control, I can select multiple polygons at once and use the same tool for moving. Now, again, I'm using the perspective view to modify and manipulate my object. That's fine if you want that. Use the perspective view when you get more advanced. But like I said, it's wise to when you first start out in the 3D interface to use your left and front views and your and your top view. That's polygon for you. Then element, I can actually select this and allows me to select the whole object, and then I can move it around. Okay. Element's one of those really neat tools. Element actually, when you're using other 3D software and you start using one model, you export into another software, hence it comes back. Element allows you to have a lot of workarounds, so you don't have objects or vertices overlaid in one another through multiple objects. So remember that for element. I want to go back to editable poly, just bounce out, and then I can actually move the whole polygon, the whole shape as I wish. So I'm going to actually select it. I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard and just knock it out. Let's take a look at some others here. So create, standard print, that's a box. Cone, left click, drag from the top, so we're building on our plane. Release my left click, then move my hand up. It allows me to extend as if it's a cylinder. I left click, and then I move my hand down, and I can actually create the kind of cone I want. And when I left click, that completes the object. Okay. Again, segments will be applied. You can indicate how many segments you want per cone. So it depends on how smooth you want to make this cone. And once I convert it with those segments, right click, let's convert to poly, editable polygon. I can go into its modify panel. Let's look at what we can do here. Vertices, I can select those top vertices. I can adjust them. If I come from the front view and say I want these line of vertices, then I can use the scale tool. Scale them out. Use the move tool. Move them. Okay. Editable poly, and let's delete this. Let's take a look at a couple more here. You can explore all these. I'm not going to go through all these in the lesson, but you can explore all these in your spare time. Let's look at cylinder. Left click, drag across my top view to create it on the plane. Release, then move my hand up to create the extension cylinder. Left click, and that completes that object. Again, you can indicate how many segments you want before you convert. I'll convert it like that, let's say. I can use the polygons. And what I can do is actually I can select all the polys on top. Notice it selects all these on the side. And then if I hold the Alt key and select, and left click and drag select, it will deselect. Okay, so again, the left click drag select, if I hold Control, I can select individual polys. I hit Control Z and back out. But if I hold the Alt key down on my keyboard, left click and drag, I can deselect. So now it allowed me to just select those top polys on the cylinder. I can just move that top part. Hence, I can use the scale tool or R on my keyboard to scale down, and use E or the rotate tool to rotate the direction I want. So go through all these primitives, explore them, see what they all do. We did explore plain teapot's most interesting. It just creates a teapot. You might see a lot of these created when you research textures online. That's how they create it. It's actually a teapot. And then also go on into extended primitives. These are some other ones that you can look into that might help you reach objects that you need to start with before you start your 3D modeling. One that I use most often is capsule. That's pretty nice because it kind of gives you an idea for a handle that you can build out these polys. So let's now go back to our character modeling. I'm going to go back up to 3ds Max at symbol, come on down, go to file, open. Just say don't save here. I'll track down my 3ds Max file, click open. Let's bring it back, and voila, we got that back open. Now in this case, what I can do is actually switch my front view. Notice it's wireframe to shaded solid. So if I left click the name front, notice I can actually have two views active at one time. Actually say I want to look at the back view, or I can actually say I want two left views, like so, okay? But in this case, I want the front view. This works for any quadrant, which we call these quadrants. Perspective view, I don't have to work in perspective. Come on down and say, let's switch perspective top view. Go back to perspective here. Okay, top view, I could say I don't want top view. Maybe I just want to do right view. Maybe I want two profile views, you know? Let's look at the wireframe. So right now I have selected wireframe, and I can actually left click on wireframe and say, give me shaded. And now you can see that now my turnaround drawing, which is what we see here in perspective view, we can now see in the front view. So this is going to allow us to actually model based off the front view because we know that everything's in perfect alignment along the z-axis. Let's do that for the left view as well. Select it, go to wireframe, and say shaded, and voila. Now a hotkey for that is F3 on my keyboard. So I can actually hit F3 and I can go between wireframe and shaded for any viewport. I'm going to call these viewports. Okay, let's get busy with character modeling. Now another thing I can do is actually, if I have this grid in my way and I'd like to actually just see the character image itself on the turnaround, I'm just going to hit G on my keyboard and that'll allow me to turn the grid off. So I can turn the grid on and off at any time I want. Some students I've worked with in the past like the grid. Me personally, I like to have that switched off. So I can activate any window, just simply hit G and I can shut it down. Okay, perfect. So now we're ready to begin. And what we're going to do is actually we're going to start with create standard primitives, a box. And when you ever 3D model a character, you want to start with the head or the facial region. Okay, so let's start with it. I'm going to left click and drag. I'm going to create this box at my origin. Notice this is my origin. I'm going to left click and drag, create this box, release, left click and drag up. Left click to create it. Notice the amount of segments I have. I'm going to actually decrease the segments to 1 on all sides. I hit the move tool. Moving on up. Bring it up to where the head will be. Make sure it's located not only where the head is here, but also let's check it out here. Make sure it's located here. Notice in my left view, it's not showing me my box, so I'm going to switch my left to my right. Left click on its name, go right, and now it's actually in front of the drawing. So that is exactly what we want. Perfect. Now, if your turnaround drawing is not lining up, just simply select the plane, and then you don't have to have them meet at a perfect point. If you need to have the frontal view here, you can move your plane to match up to where your box is. So that would help you out, okay? All right, perfect. Now I'm going to take this box, select it. Now, if I hit Z on my keyboard, that goes right to that object, or whatever object might be in your 3D interface here as I pan around. So if I had another box down here, just for example, let me clone one real quick. And I hit Z, it would go to that box. I could zoom out, I can hit this object, hit Z, and it goes right to that box. And that's perfect, it's exactly what you want. Makes life easy, so you're not like panning around inside this interface trying to get around and do your thing. So I'm going to select it, hit Z, and I'm right on that object, and I can model based off that object now. To go full screen in the perspective view, you can hit Alt-W, and that will transfer it into the professional view. If I hit Alt-W with this window selected again, it will minimize it down. Okay. Again, that gives you into the expert window. So I'm going to go Alt-W in my perspective grid, and now that goes full view. Now, as you model, you'll notice that some of these objects are going to have shadows being projected onto your planes. That can get kind of annoying, especially when you have too many objects in one place. To turn off your shadows, see how this is giving me a default shadow that's casting? I can go to Realistic, come on down to Lighting and Shadows, and just uncheck Shadows, and now that will disappear and give you a better modeling atmosphere to work with. I'm going to go Alt-W. I'm going to have this window selected. When you do Alt-W, make sure you don't have an object selected. Make sure everything's deselected. You go Alt-W and get yourself back, okay? I take this box, and we can see that this is the front, as if this is like the front of the face, facing outward. I'm going to go and convert this to a polygon now. All right, go ahead and open up and go to Poly. I'll left-click and drag and select the polygons I really don't need. So we actually come down to just the simple side of this box. I hit delete. So we only have one face or one poly to really work with. Now seeing this, we know that if this is going to become our face, this side, I want to make sure this profile view of this plane is matched up with that forward piece. So if you notice that my face is facing this way, that's what we're indicating. I'm going to select my plane now, and we want to make sure that that's going to be lined up with the profile view. So if I move my plane back and I hit F3, or I go from shaded to wireframe, I can get a better idea of where that is in reference to my face, my head. Wireframe back to shaded, and voila. Now notice the gizmo controller, if I select this box, is kind of off center. So if I wanted to fix the gizmo controllers for any objects, anything that's interseeing any of these objects, I can go to the hierarchy menu, which is right here. I can say Effect Pivot Point Only. I can hit Center to Object, and that will center that pivot point. And I'm going to uncheck Pivot Point Only, and now I'm back to square one, and I can move it based off its origin value. So I'm going to do that for the planes as well. Select the plane, hierarchy, Effect Pivot Point, Center to Object. Select this one, Effect Pivot Point Only, Center to Object, voila. Deactivate that, and now I can move my plane based off the middle. Makes it a lot easier. All right, so now we're ready to start modeling the head based off our turnaround drawing. One of my favorite websites to use for actually downloading human anatomy images is 3D.sk. So I'm going to bring this website up. Again, it's 3D.sk. This is a fantastic website, used very often. You can come through all these menus and find a good turnaround front and side view of either a male or female facial. And you can use these images to bring in a 3ds Max or a 3D software for modeling needs. So if I was to browse this, and let's look for gender, I want a man, and race, it doesn't matter. Let's see, that's fine. Age, yeah, let's do like maybe 21, 30. And let's search. Go over, I'm going to say poses. Body type, athletic. Okay. So as you can see, just by putting those settings and kind of refine a little bit more, I'm finding images that I can use for 3D modeling purposes. So I could use this profile view here and even this frontal of this man here. This is exactly what I need for 3D modeling. So I'm going to say this image. Perfect. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to save image as. Track down my folder here. I'll say male front. On back. I'm going to find another one. Let's say I click on it, save image as male side. Now back to 3ds Max. I'm going to create two more planes. I'm going to go create, Create a plane. Let's create this one in the front, something that's going to fit and accommodate the face. Let's go segments 1. I'll hold the rotate tool down, hold shift, select rotate, hold shift, left click drag. Get another plane. I'll create a copy. Okay. Remember, you can right click and use the clone if you want. Make it easier. Move tool. Let's move this plane on in. Let's get it positioned correctly in the top view. Left click drag, select both these. Then use the middle control and I can move them simultaneously. Let's put those like right about here. This is where the face is going to go. Okay, now what I'll do, I'll make sure your planes are as close as they can be. Perfect alignment. If you have to use these control properties down here, noticing this could actually be -90. This plane here, that's 90 degrees, perfect. This plane is got an 89, so this actually be 90. Whoops, 90. There we go. And then these down here is actually 0. There we go. So that way they're not a little crooked. You can use those X, Y, and Z positional values and make sure you're doing 90s on these. Whoops. You can see I moved this one. This is actually supposed to be 90, 90. Perfect. 90, -180, 90. Sometimes you're going to see -180. Whatever the negatives, make sure that it's not a weird number like 89 point something. You're a little bit off, okay? And that way you got perfect planes to work with here. Okay, let me go back to Material Editor. Click the symbol or hit M on the keyboard. Upload another one. Say select the next swatch over to fuse. Track it down. Let's do a frontal here. Let's get to a left click, hold that symbol down, scroll on over, grab rectangle, get a better glance of what it's going to look like. Just make sure you show material map and viewport. Left click, drag, drop on the plane. Perfect. It's going to work out great. Let's do the next swatch over. Texture has to be on its own individual swatch. Click the fuse, like we learned already. Bitmap, side. Left click, hold that down. Let's go rectangle. Use middle mouse wheel, rotate around, see what it's going to look like. And show shaded material and viewport. Left click, drag, drop that on plane, and voila. That's our frontal. Let's see, this is our frontal. Exactly one, and this is our side. If you drop it on the wrong one, just left click, drag, and drop it on the right one that you need. All right, I'm going to close this out. We're ready to go. Keep in mind that you can go to my LinkedIn page at linkedin.com if you would like to link up with me and have me as a resource and a reference in your list of contacts. You can send me a message at my LinkedIn, and that will reach out to my Yahoo email, hence my Gmail accounts, and I can always be there to help you. Thank you for watching, and look forward to working with you.